Yog'thoth Builders. We are back this week with probably the last water nation that we're going to check out personally in the early era with R'lyeh, Time of the Aboleths. Very cool nation, but some distinct problems that really make them difficult to play. That being said, there are difficulties that can be overcome, and we're going to take a look at that here. Let's go ahead and start by checking out their lore. In the deepest of oceans lives the strange fish-like race called the Aboleths. These beings are highly intelligent, and the older Aboleths, called Mind Lords, can enslave lesser beings by force of mind alone. Having this power means they have enslaved mermen and deep ones to do the daily work and fill up the ranks of their armies. In a deep gorge, the enslaved workers have built a score of small but magnificent cities for their rulers. In this gorge live the greatest of Aboleths. These guys are kind of interesting. They are one of the, I guess you'd call them antagonists, but maybe that's not right. They're one of the main driving forces of what happens to the water nations. So just like above water, you have Ermor is one of the driving forces of early age and the things that happen and where people end up in middle age. What's the same here for R'lyeh and the underwater nations? They are a big problem. They are a big, big problem. And they get worse, frankly, as time goes on. For national features, we are not fully aquatic, but darn close as an underwater nation. Our military is Atlanteans and Oceanian slaves and some Aboleths. A lot of semi-familiar units from Atlantis or other underwater with just a couple of our own here. Our magic is very strong astral, very strong water, and just a teeny tiny amount of death, earth, glamour, nature. We have average priests, but that's a little bit misleading because we have this guy who can go above water, and he's only a priest 1. Our other ones are restricted to being underwater. For our scales, we get a magic limit +1. We build standard forts. That means underwater we have the, what are they called? Pebble forts. They're the 1200 gold forts, and above water we have the standard 1000 for the age. For our site, we have the Gorge of the Ancient Cities, which allow us to recruit our Aboleth units, and we get 3 astral pearls, 2 water, and an earth. So decent income here, all things that we can definitely use. Checking out our units, we have a odd medley here. One of the prevailing themes of most of them is that all of these units are slave units. That means they have really bad morale, and they are dirt cheap when it comes to their upkeep. So 3 gold per year for this guy. The morale is a big problem for us, and it's something you really need to think about, or just know how the battles are going to flow here. We are not going to like grindy combat. We are not going to like those tight fights that you just kind of edge out and win. We need to win by a lot, or we need to just do like almost like a fighting retreat with battles, because these guys are going to die in droves and they're going to run away in droves. Let's go ahead and take a look at the Lobo Guard and the Shambler Thrall first, because they are kind of unique within their lineup here. The Lobo Guard is dirt cheap. He is dirt cheap. 5 gold, 1 resource, 2 recruitment points. You can pump these out by the bucket load. At 9 attack and 12 slashing damage, that's actually not too bad. They are a full size 3 unit, unfortunately. I wish they were size 2. Of note here, they are amphibious, so this is one of the units that we can use to get above water. They are magic beings. This means you can only lead them with mages or other people who have magic leadership. And our main leadership here does not have magic leadership. That means you're probably going to end up having to lead him with this guy, and he only has 40 with a -1 to morale, and he is not a taskmaster. So the morale on these guys is pretty bad. However, it doesn't matter because we've lobotomized them. So they're mindless. So we have 50 morale, it's perfect. However, when your mage that is leading them is retreating, these guys will actually disintegrate like undead do when they lose their leadership. So keep that in mind, and we will have problems with morale on our mages too, so it is a thing. They are absolutely 2 gold a year, and frankly, if one of these guys lived a year, I'd be shocked. So you are not going to pay much in upkeep for these guys. And we have perfect dark vision, so we are great at fighting in that deep water. And if we can make it to the caves, we're great down there. Pretty decent unit here. The 9 attack is okay. We have some Mind Blasters, which will help lower things defense because they will stun them. So these guys can overrun people pretty decently. Our big brother of that is the Shambler Thrall. These guys go up to size 4. However, they have a lot more HP at 24. Very similar in stats, except for these guys are actually Tramplers. That's actually pretty decent. 20 gold is a little bit on the pricey side, especially for someone who's only 7 protection. But deployed correctly, you can do some great trampling against size 3 guys with this. Having a bit of protection is nice. They have the perfect morale, so they will fight to the end unless they lose their magic leadership, which they will crumble. So those are 2 units that we have that are decent and can go above water. So keep those guys in mind when you're looking at the rest of your troops. Next up, we have 3 varieties of Atlantean units. We have a slave trooper, a slave guardian, and a different slave guardian. So for the base guy, he's amphibious, he's got perfect dark vision, he is a slave. He actually is not lobotomized, so he only has a 7 morale. So even with our good leader, he would only have a 9. So these guys are pretty darn cowardly. This frame here only is wielding a bone trident. Tridents are great weapons. They are length 3, they give you an extra defense, and they're pretty damaging. However, no defenses, very little natural protection, basic defense skill. These guys will die in absolute droves, and they will run away quickly. So not particularly useful in my opinion. Next up, we have 2 slightly better ones. So we have this guy here, who is the same exact chassis, I believe, except for he has put on some shell armor, giving him 10 body protection, which is pretty handy. But I think for 1 extra resource, putting on the shell cap for 10 protection on the head is probably worth it here. That gives us a 12 because we have 2 natural stacking with the 10. Bone Trident's a good weapon. They are still going to have the same morale issues though. As far as troops go, I do like having some of these guys. The length 3 weapons means you can fight other spear users without getting repelled. If you're fighting things with like poison spines, that can be rather handy. These guys are okay. Next up, we have some different merman options, and one of the big things here is make sure you check. You have guys like this one who are amphibians, but we also have guys like this one who are aquatic. So make sure you know what you're getting and choose appropriately. So for the first slave trooper, this is an amphibious one. He has a net and a stone spear and no armor. I like nets, but man, these guys are going to die in droves. Their other problem is they're speed 22, and the guys you're probably going to use for your line are speed 8. It is quite hard to script these in a way that you want these guys and them to arrive essentially at the same time. So we get up to the front, hopefully they throw their net, and then we stab them. That's the ideal situation, but it is very difficult to get a speed 8 and a speed 22 to arrive at the same time. Next up, we have a similar troop. This is an aquatic version, and he has a stone spear. I don't think I would ever get these guys. If I'm going to take this type of thing, I'm getting the net. Next up, we have the same as the first guy, who is an amphibian. He actually put some armor on, so now we're up to protection 11. But at 9, 10, 6, 9, 11, 6, and 18 damage with the trident versus 12 damage with the stone spear, I think I go with the trident every time. I think having the extra damage is just worth it. They're both pretty garbage troops. I'd rather have the one that's going to maybe kill somebody. And our final merman troop is a variant with a bone trident and armor, but he's aquatic only. So these guys are usable. They're much quicker. So if you want to maybe team them up with their net variety, that's something. They can't go above water though. So when you're done using these guys, you're stuck with them. You're going to be paying their admittedly small upkeep, but nothing to do with them. So I tend to prefer the amphibious ones, maybe at the very, very beginning when you know just through attrition you're going to lose these guys, start with these and then switch over. That could be a thing. Yeah, not overly much. I guess 15 HP is kind of notable. You might survive a hit, maybe. Underwater is pretty darn stabby, though, so I tend to find that things underwater have very high attrition, no matter what you are, essentially. Next up, we have two different Aboleths. This is the Giboleth. This is a non-sacred Aboleth who is aquatic only. He is a magic being, so you must be led by a mage or other magical leadership. He has Spirit Sight and Void Sanity. I don't believe Void Sanity plays any part in early age. That is more of a later thing for Rylai, but essentially that gives you a resistance to going insane from your own dominion. These guys are notable for having Mind Blast. And with the new system, it is a 5 fatigue cost to cast Mind Blast, and they tend to go to about 50 fatigue, and then they switch to melee mode, which is garbage, because you'll go up and get yourself killed, and you're a 40 gold unit. That's really disappointing to me. I wish you could have hold and fire, and they would just rest until they could fire again safely. I think for all people with natural range weapons, that should be the natural behavior, but it's not, so these guys are usable. They're definitely usable. Mind Blasts are still good, but we have a better option, I think. We have the Gibodai. This is our cap-only sacred. Very, very similar to the other guy, but he now has a life drain as his melee, so that helps you stay alive, and a Mind Blast. And it's the same Mind Blast. What is interesting for this guy, because he's sacred, you can give him reinvigoration. And if you can get to 5 reinvigoration, you can essentially fire forever. You never have to stop Mind Blasting. And that makes these guys infinitely better. These guys are always useful when you're underwater, as they're aquatic only, of course. However, there is like a minimum mass that you need before the Mind Blasting gets really good. So there's like, before you have that, you hit people, but it doesn't do much. When you're right at the line, you'll start actually getting a few kills maybe and getting a few stuns. And then when you cross that line solidly, you'll stun most of the enemy army as they slowly trail in towards you. And then your big bone tridents will come in and just stab the stun dudes. It's very, very good. But there's definitely like a certain number of these needed, a critical mass, to make them decent. And our final unit here is the Androlith. These guys can only be recruited in coastal forts, so above water. Getting above water is one of our main goals, because there's only so much room underwater, and there's only so many thrones underwater. We gotta get up there. Unlike Atlantis, we can build forts above water, and we really want to because of this guy. He is a 50 gold, 16 resource, 23 recruitment, so he is not cheap in any way. However, he is a Mind Blaster, and he is not a sacred, so he is not limited by how many we can get, and he's amphibious. So if we have 300 of these and we win a war, well, we can just move to the next war. We're not stuck underwater like our other ones would be. They also have a bronze spear, so if something gets to them, they can at least try to fight. And they have a second attack, which better than not having a second attack. And they're at least wearing a bronze cuirass, so they have at least a little bit of defense, or a little bit of protection here. I quite like these guys. Just like I was saying on the previous unit, though, you really do need a critical mass of these guys. So I tend to find that when I get above water, I want as many of these as I possibly can get, and I want to throw something in front of them to just buy time for them to get the kills. Of note here, all of our damage is going to be coming from magic saves, so just know that if you go up against something with really high magic resistance, these guys aren't going to be nearly as good. Next up, let's take a look at our commanders, heroes, and prophet. Let's start with our hero. We have one, he is the Mind Lord, not to be confused with our unit or our commander we can recruit, who is also a Mind Lord. This is a named Mind Lord, and he has Enslaved Mind, so you can actually enslave things he hits with that if they don't save. I mean, he's fine. That's a neat power. I believe he is truly unique, so you're only going to get the one of him. He comes in with 4 astral and 4 water, so he's pretty powerful, but he's aquatic only, so it's whatever. I'm glad you have him. He's not going to really change too much. One thing he is really good at is magical leadership. So if you are in a big underwater battle, he can actually lead some of our troops, and a lot of them. So pretty good there. For our normal commanders, we have a scout. This is, I believe, very similar to the Atlantis Lookout. It might even be the same exact dude. He has a coral knife. You never want to be fighting with a scout, so it's whatever. He does have dark vision, and he is an amphibian, so you'll need some of these guys to get out scouting. Of note, I would say, underwater provinces can be really hard. Like, really hard. There can be... Even just a single water mage could really decimate an army if he's throwing some water elementals or just getting some free water strikes. So it is really, really important that we have good scouting. It may even be worth pinging normal provinces just to be doubly sure. And we also need to find weak points on the shore to bring our junky troops on shore and try to get a foothold so we can get some better land troops. So these guys are pretty important. You're going to need a decent amount of them. Next up, we have our, I would say, our only real commander. This is a slave prince. He's an Atlantean. He's a good leader. He's got that meteorite trident, so piercing, magic, 27 damage is good. He's good with it. He's wearing the meteorite armor, which is good armor. So he ends up with 21 protection, still having 10 defense. And he's got a, he's got a length 3 trident, so he can maybe even get some repelling going on. He's pretty solid. 27 HP really, really makes this guy stand and fight. He's amphibious, so he can take our guys on land. He's got his own dark vision. He's a taskmaster, and he's also a slave. So his morale isn't actually the best. But he's cheap. Only 44 gold a year for a good commander. And he gives +1 to squads and an additional one if they're a slave. So he's the guy you're going to want to be leading around troops. Thumbs up from me. I like this guy. He definitely would appreciate if you'd give him something that helps his morale. So if you want to do a little bit of crafting, that would be something that would definitely help him. Next up, we have a slave priest. This is like a merman, ocean guy. He's amphibious, and he's a sacred priest 1. Nothing much to say here. He does have a quarterstaff, so he might get a repel if he gets something really, really weak attacking him. I wouldn't count on that, though. You'll probably need a couple of these guys to build temples and do some preaching, but other than that, not really remarkable. Next up, we have the slave priest. The slave mage. These guys are pretty good in the fact that for a mage that is guaranteed 3 paths and a random, he only costs 98 gold per year in upkeep. That's pretty good. That gives us a decent, efficient researcher. So let's round that to 100 for 13. That's not bad. That's not bad at all. And he gets a random, so 2 water, 1 astral, and his random is water, earth, astral, or nature. Of these, I would say nature is by far the most important. You want to get out and nature search every underwater province you take because you're hoping to find kelp fortresses, which is just a free fort for you. That is super duper good. I found 1 in my test game, and it really, really helped me get out of the early game funk and get moving. Otherwise, he's also amphibious, so he is your land mage. Most of our other ones are only aquatic, so we're going to have to craft construction level 5 items to get them out of the water, and this guy can go up there from the beginning. He's not a spectacular mage for combat, but he's okay. He can jump in communions, which might help with some other things. Next up, we have an Aboleth. This is our, I guess you'd say, main mage from these guys. 2 water, 2 astral, and a random of water, earth, astral, or glamour. 15 research for 240 upkeep. And that's going to be a theme with these guys. They are far too expensive for upkeep. You can really screw yourself by getting too many aquatic things, conquering the ocean, and then not being able to afford to leave the ocean. So I do not like these guys. I would not get them. If I was going to get one, I'd get maybe 1 to lead my magic troops around, and specifically the lobotomized troops, so that they have the 50 morale and I don't have to worry about his bad leadership. Otherwise, though, having the Mind Blast is nice. He does have double life drains, but Only 6 protection and 54 HP. These guys are definitely mortal. They will die. I'm going to skip this one, and we're going to check these next two, and then we'll come back. Next, we have the Aboleths. This is a cap-only version. He's Water 1, Astral 2, Death. Priest level 1, and he can get Water, Earth, Astral, and Death. So you could roll into some Death 2s. It sure would be nice to go out site searching with a Death 2. But again, the problem is 150 gold per year. How many of these do you want to have trapped underwater? I mean, that's dead on what I would consider okay for efficient research. 10 gold per research, so we're gaining nothing there. Our other guys aren't particularly slow even, so it's not like this guy's like just going to speed us up particularly. Overall, I don't think I particularly like these guys. They do have Theft of Life, which is an interesting ability. It is a armor negating life drain that is magic resisted, and it's area effect 1. So, interesting. I mean, that is really powerful, but yeah, I don't know. I'm not sold on it. Next up, we have the Mind Lord. This is our big cap only mage. 3 water, 3 astral, a random of water, earth, astral, glamour. The problem with these guys, as with the others, aquatic only, 424 gold. That is ridiculous. And he has the big problem of mages like this that have like 2 or more big paths. If I cast a water spell, I'm not using my astral. If I cast my astral spell, I'm not using my water. But I have to pay for both of them anyways. This guy is rough, man. I might get one of these if I'm in big underwater wars and I want to cast anti-magic because he can just do it out of the box turn 1. You don't have to communion up before you can do that. That can be pretty important. But beyond that, I am not a fan of this guy. He does have that enslaved mind thing, so maybe you could steal something interesting. Most of the time, you'll probably just get chaff troops. Yeah, I'm not a fan. And unfortunately, speaking of not a fan, we have the Grandmother. This is an immobile Astral 1 Holy 3 Priest. The problem with these are, A, they're not movable. B, they are Dominion monster summoners. They summon in little polyp guys, which are essentially just chaff units. They're not particularly great. The problem is, you can't turn that off. And she's not even movable, so I couldn't even like get some and then suicide her into a throne. She can't cast teleport natively, so I can't just teleport her into a throne or above water and kill her. So you're going to end up with a ton of these little summons. Then you're going to have no place to stick them. They're going to clog up your map, like your menus. It's hard to recruit things. I'm not a huge fan of this. I haven't double tested that to make sure that that's still the case, but I haven't read anything that has changed. So unfortunately for me, this is a skip. The only time I wouldn't skip this is if I'm in a bitter underwater war and I need some free chaff stuff, some free spawn, and I need to have a Holy 3. Otherwise, I think that's a big skip for me. And same here for the Polypal Mother. She's only a priest level 2. She also is immobile, also summons in the same things. I wouldn't bother here. Just not worth it. Just absolutely not worth it. They do some other cool things, like they have the Void Sanity. They make other people, they have visions and stuff, so like they drive people crazy, but none of that's particularly helpful for the way we need to get out of the water. Finally, we have the Androdai. This is our above water mage recruit, and he's pretty junk. He is an Astral 1, Holy 1. He can get a Water, Earth, Astral, or Glamour. For 265, that's way overpriced. He does have a life drain as a melee attack. He starts insane. So that is, I believe, a percentile. So he has a 10% chance to just do whatever. He may decide to patrol. He may decide to move. He may decide to deconstruct your lab. Yeah, that could be pretty rough. If I was going to get these guys, I would probably use them to support communions of slave mages. They do have the benefit that while a slave mage only has 7 morale, they have 15. So they will stay on the field, so maybe you need them to stay on the field and do some magic leadership. So that definitely gives them a place. But beyond that, they're nothing particularly to write home about. Who would I make my profit? I think 9 times out of 10 it's going to be a slave prince because he can get out of the water. That also gives us a mobile Holy 3 who can cast Sermons of Courage, which our non-lobotomized troops would quite appreciate. If I wasn't going to do him, I would probably do a Mind Lord just to get rid of his upkeep cost. I could see that being useful, but I think it's always going to land on the Slave Prince here. Next up, let us look at national spells and magic items. As for magic items, we have one magic item. We have the Anemone Mace. This one's actually kind of interesting. So it has an on-hit poison effect. Good attack value there. A little bit low on the damage, but the poison is magic poison 15. It's armor piercing. And you have a chance to proc a Paralyze, which is armor negating, magic resist negate. So these are okay. I could see maybe using these. They are length 1, so I'd have to think about that. It's probably going to go on one of our slave princes, so you're going to be training on a Meteorite Trident for this. So I would only do that if for some reason I thought this was going to be really important. Maybe you're fighting an Awake Expander that's vulnerable to poison, and maybe you think you might paralyze. I don't know. Not a ton of use cases here, but it's a cool item. They have something at least. As for magic, we have 2 national spells, and both of them are from Thaumaturgy. Our first one is at Thaumaturgy 3, called Mind Vessel. 3 astral to cast, 15 astral pearls. What this one does is essentially you target one of your own commanders and you give them your magic paths, essentially. Like you put your mind into their body. This could be useful if, let's say, you need to get some of your high, like you have some Aboleth Lords or Mind Lords, and you need to get that magic above water, so like very specifically. I could see using it. In general practice, though, for 15 pearls, I don't know. I think I'd rather just do a communion at that point with things that are already above water. Yeah, let me know if you guys have found good use of this. I'm not sold on this one. Our second one is Thaumaturgy 5, which is kind of high, but we do have good astral casting. We do have good water casting, so there's stuff in here that we can at least do. And for 3 astral and 2 water, Enslave Sea Trolls for 10 astral pearls is actually pretty good. You get 5+, and these are armored with Coral Glaive Sea Trolls. So they have regen and underwater regen. They are very, very tough units. Quite usable, quite good. We don't have a ton of uses, particularly for our pearls, and we have a decent income. So I could totally see going for this. If I was going to go for this, I would probably still go up Conjuration first, and we'll talk about why here in a second, and then I would come here second. Let my pearls have some time to build up before I get here. As for non-national magic that's important, just like anybody else who's fighting underwater, you gotta go for water elementals. It's just the meta of the underseas. So, summon water power at 2 is very important for all of our water mages. At 3, we can start doing lesser water elementals, and at 5, we can start doing full water elementals. Other things that are good here, Contact Sea Trolls gives you some nice uses for water gems into troops, and Sea Trolls are probably better than any troop we could get underwater, so that could be quite good there. We also might even go up to Bishopfish for some more mobile Holy 3s. Also of note, Voice of Tiamat is a really, really good remote site searching spell. It requires 2 water and 8 water gems to cast, but it will find all elemental sites in a province. It will search them at strength 9, so fire, air, water, and earth can all be searched by this. This gives us a chance to search for things that otherwise we couldn't get. And because we have to kind of jankily find our way above water, every gem helps. Every gem gives us something we could summon or something we could craft that might help us with that. And both air and water gems are very, very valuable because we're going to either need to craft Amulets of the Fish at Conjuration 5, which gives you air breathing. Shambler Skins, though, will allow you to get above water. This is one way, so Construction 3 with water, we can get air breathing. So we could get some of our Aboleths or other things above water, but it's expensive. Like you're talking mage turns, research turns. It's pricey. Our other option is the Amulet of the Fish over here, and this is a water and air to get it, and it will give you air breathing and your mount too if you have one, so you can go above water. Other than that, magic wise, you're probably looking at just using your water stuff, which means cold spells when you're above water, which means you probably want to think about taking cold scales because that will help out your cold spells when you're up there. Otherwise, we don't particularly have mages that are good at anything except for Astral. And as for Astral, you're probably looking at Mind Burn and Soul Slay. Soul Slay, they're at 5. That's probably your main ones. I mean, Paralyze has its uses. There's other things, but those are probably your big ones there. So we are pretty limited in our magic. Our other guys, with the exception of maybe a very rare Death 2, only have usually one in a path. So there'll be some odds and ends from like Alteration, where maybe you can get some self-buffing going on, but you're not going to be doing any major path casting outside of that. Let us bring all of that together. We have very cheap troops that range from basically worthless to okay. We have bad leadership for them. That matters for some troops more than others. We have really good Mind Blaster troops, especially a coastal fort recruit that has no other limitations, and a sacred that, with enough reinvigoration, can permanently cast Mind Blast for entire battles. In my mind, you have two goals in the early game. You need to get your cap circle quickly because these are expensive at 50 gold a pop. You need as much income as you could possibly get to get those out, and you're going to use those to dominate the ocean, while at the same time, you're going to be looking for some place to make landfall. So in the game behind me, I started here. I queened out everything around there, and I started expanding. I kind of got stuck. This is a kind of awkward map. I do think we are going to play on this map on stream. I was struggling to generate a map for 3 water nations that didn't have us all like right next to each other. So generally, I did randomize the map, but I saved it so that we can play on it. It's kind of an interesting one. We'll talk about when we actually play. But once I was kind of choking out underwater and I had to struggle over here to do a war, I started looking very hard. Okay, where am I going to make landfall? And I actually had landfall here, but I got kicked out. And then I made landfall over here, and I managed to grow, and I'm forting like crazy up here because I do not want to get kicked out. Because if I get kicked out at this point, there's a distinct chance that I won't be able to get back on land. Because our water troops are just junko when they're coming up against, let's say, Abyssians. A random dude with a 9 attack and 12 damage claw is not going to be killing Abyssians. I need to have my mind burn guys to give me a chance against something like that. This is also a nation that indies matter. So, like, I'm building a fort here, and one of the reasons is I can get some heavies, and that'll give me something of a line troop to use. For the time being, I've actually been using light infantry, not even the javelin variety, because this is the one place I can recruit a decent amount of troops. And I basically just throw bodies at people while my army here mind burns everything down as fast as possible. Major things to consider. How are you going to get out of the water? How are you going to beat up the other underwater nations? Those are two things you have to have an answer to. You cannot go into the game and then be like, oh yeah, what do I need to do that? You need a plan from jump to be able to do that. And part of that's going to be your pretender design, which I think has a large influence on how that's going to go. Give me a second and we will come in and look at the pretenders. All right, like many underwater nations, we do not have the best choices. We do have some unique ones. We have the Polypal Queen, pretty cheap. She does give you Dominion free spawn chaff. That could be something there. We already get +1 magic scale, so that literally doesn't matter. Kind of superfluous to even give it to her. Pathing is the same exact pathings we already have. That's how I feel about that one. Void Lurker, again, map move 0. Same scale that we already have. I like Dagon, but he's just too dang expensive on every single nation that can take him. He has a grab and swallow attack for anything smaller than him that he can just literally eat, and he just kills them and digests them. Otherwise, you have some Titans here. We have a first spawn. Nothing particularly special about him. Some aquatic only guys. So one thing to note here, be careful who you're picking and make sure that they are not aquatic only and that they will help you get above water ideally. So maybe Earth Snake, if you haven't used him before, he could help you out with that. For me, I actually went down here to a Grand Hydromancer for a couple reasons. Let me load him. Okay, this is Keeper of the Deep, and he is a Grand Hydromancer. And I took him because I was going to go Imprisoned. I've spoke many times about how I generally don't like Imprisoned guys, but I took that for a very specific reason here. He gives us enough points to have good scales, and by good I mean we're able to dump the things we don't care about and take the things we care about. So 2 Turmoil, 2 Sloth, 2 Cold, but we have 2 Growth, we have 2 Luck, and we have 3 Magic. In addition to that, we are running a pretty heavy Bless actually, but none of it's incarnate. We have Precision, we have 5 Reinvigoration, so our Sacred Mind Blasters can literally Mind Blast until the end of time, never run out. I took double magic resistance just to kind of counteract other people doing magic-y stuff to me. And with our high magic scales, we're going to be giving -1 resistance. So this not only counters that, it gives me 1 additional. And then I took Arcane Finesse, which will stack nicely with our own Dominion to give the enemy -2 magic resist. And if you remember when we were looking at other things, we have a lot of Mind Burners or other things that do magic resist negates. So this is one way to lower that by 2, which is quite a powerful amount. Otherwise, he took some varieties of magic pathing, so he can craft some different things, etc., etc. And specifically, I want him to be able to come out and have the possibility to cast Lost Land. Lost Land costs 100 Earth Gems, hence why that Voice of Tiamat for searching might be really important to you. What does Lost Land do? Lost Land drags a coastal province underwater. It only has a range of 3, and it costs 100 Earth Gems. We can't do it on highlands or mountains, and it can only be coasts. However, we'll drown 50% of the population, and we will pull them underwater. Why do I care about that? Well, we fight underwater much, much better than other people. I would say we're probably tied with Atlantis for strongest underwater in early age. So, for example, this throne. I'm going to probably struggle to hold this if Atlantis wants it. But if I pull it underwater, good luck Atlantis, A, getting underwater, and B, beating me underwater. He will never drag that back from me once it's underwater. So that is the reason there. So any throne that is on a coast is a possible target. And I believe, note, I have not tested this, even if it's not coastal, I could sink the swamps and then sink that. That's my at least game plan. So in this game, I had 2 water thrones, which was pretty good, and then nothing else. There's some underground ones, etc., etc. But this could be quite difficult depending on where those thrones land. So having that option to pull things underwater and make that safe, that would give me 3 thrones that are essentially mine and no one can touch, and then I just need to get one more for my standard 8-point victory that I normally play under. So that is the thought process for him. Beyond that, he also is a gem generator. He generates 1 water gem. Not the most important thing ever, especially for an imprisoned god, but it's something. You know, it's better than nothing. And I may have to mass convert via alchemy gems into earth gems to sink a couple provinces. So every single gem may be very important to me. Overall, I do like this guy. It's probably who I'm going to play. I'd be really curious to see if anybody else made something else work, because I played around a little bit with those other guys, and I didn't see anything that even looked fun, frankly. The best I had was Hard Skin Earth Snake. With enough nature, he can cast Personal Regen, and the reason I liked him was he really made getting above water much, much easier. But beyond that, Hard Skin doesn't do anything really for us. and having a two-nature snake doesn't really change anything either. He would allow me to search Earth very effectively above water, so I guess that's something, and then get those early Earth gems, but you still have to hold it, even if you find the gems, so I don't know. Not super sold on that one there. Okay, so that is going to be the intro for early era R'lyeh. I noticed this is actually kind of a quick one, but a lot of troops are just kind of variations of themselves. There's not a lot of variety in our magic that we can cast, and we have a very set game plan. Win underwater, get on land, hold coastal forts. So everything you're thinking about is along those three goals. So I'm curious there, has anyone else managed to go through a full game of early era R'lyeh? I even went on and I checked on various servers, including Lucid's server, which normally has pretty good discussions about nations. There were only a couple comments about this one. I think a lot of people just are not interested in fully or mostly aquatic nations because they're just a pain in the rear to play. And for fighting against them, the reason I usually do random land nations in my games, it's not fun to be raided by somebody from underwater when you can't fight back. So if I'm playing an AI game, I'm probably not going to let them spawn in. So it's going to be a nation that we have not seen, I don't think, at all on my streams. Will be pretty interesting. In addition, this is going to be the chance to show you guys Oceania and Pelagia. We'll talk about them on the actual streams a little bit, but these are two nations that I'm not going to play through before we move on to Middle Age. Just spoilers, Pelagia really struggles to get on land. Their best stuff is all aquatic, and they're good at being aquatic, but they're aquatic. And so that's a huge pain. That's a huge, huge pain. And we have Oceania, who doesn't necessarily have that problem because they are actually amphibious, but this is literally Sea Pangea, but worse is what these guys are. So that is what that is, I suppose. We'll take a peek at them on the actual stream. Okay, builders. Hopefully this was interesting. I know, like I said, it's a little bit of a shorter one, but I'm really looking for feedback on this one. If you've done it, especially if you've actually done it, I think this could be a very, very hard stream depending on who spawns and where they spawn and which thrones we have and where they are. In the game I was showing off there, I had, I think, 3 thrones that had large groups of watchers, and I have no idea how to kill those because they're mindless, so I can't mind blast them. And I have garbage troops that can't hit hard enough. So I'm not even sure what my game plan is going to be. Maybe see if they die if I drowned them. Maybe that would be the game plan there. So, all right, that's going to do it for Early Age R'lyeh. I'm looking forward to the discussion as always. If you're watching this as it's going live, do remember that the stream this week will be a little bit early. Watch this space, and I will post on when that's going to be. I don't have that quite solidified yet, but I look forward to seeing everyone there. One way or the other, we're going to get wet and salty. So, yeah, bring your favorite sea shanty or your favorite Cthulhu myth monster and join me. It's going to be a fun time. All right, builders, I will talk to you there.